In the mid to late 70s, the pioneers of LA hard rock and metal paved the way for the LA metal explosion that followed in the early 80s. Meanwhile, there was also an underground metal movement in Los Angeles that was heavily influenced by the new wave of British heavy metal. Seeking to break new ground, these young, innovative artists set forth to play music both faster and heavier than their predecessors could have possibly dreamed of. This bold and fearless movement manifested as the rise of LA thrash metal. By the early 80s, LA nightclubs were still recovering from the immense damage caused by the rampaging punk rock movement. Understandably, many club owners became decidedly hesitant when it came to booking thrash bands in their esteemed venues. Ultimately, thrash and speed metal were banned from significant Hollywood venues such as the Troubadour and Roxy, forcing many thrash bands to perform on the outskirts of LA. South Central, Long Beach, and East LA venues such as Fender's Ballroom, the Olympic Auditorium, the Balboa Theater, the Vex, and the Waters Club in San Pedro, and even Iguanas in Tijuana, Mexico, became the new breeding ground for LA thrash metal in the mid-80s.
Pasadena had an incredible rock scene growing up. It disappeared when because that was the first gentrification project in LA, was the rebuilding of Old Town Pasadena. It used to be boarded up brick, desolate buildings with a few rock clubs and bars, and a fantastic rock and roll scene with Perkins Palace and Gina Zamparelli and all those incredible acts that went on there. And so I do want to give props to the Pasadena scene that once was.
To go back what I was saying about the LA scene, outsiders still identify it with glam metal. Yeah, it existed. It was popular. That's what dominated the Sunset Strip. But every so often, a lot of these heavier, aggressive bands would play. Very rarely Gazzarri's, but a lot of Roxy shows, Whiskey, Troubadour. And, wherever they played, we went. Balboa Theater in Los Angeles. There was another spot. Fender's Ballroom. Were the clubs crowded? Yes. Were the lines around the block? Yeah, damn right they were. But it was kind of a coin flip for a lot of club owners and booking agents to actually take a chance on a lot of these thrash bands. And obviously I'm speaking about the bands that came out of Los Angeles.
As you're talking about the LA scene, we never ever got off there. And we tried everything. We played Skippy Lowe's, Gazzarri's, Troubadour, Roxy. Whiskey was close at the time. Madame Wong's.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We used to do the Troubadour during the week, and I remember our first show, we just had a lot of people, and then the owner of the Troubadour right away stuck Abattoir into a headlining position and or supporting bands like Wasp. So that was our first break into the Hollywood scene.
And back then, the clubs in Hollywood were all tables and chairs. If you remember the Whiskey, the Troubadour, the Roxy, they all had tables and chairs right up to the downstage edge. Well, when Armored Saint came into town and we followed as the headbangers, that all changed.
First time we played the Troubadour, I mean, it was on all of our minds. Like, this has to look like the Marquee in London, not like the Troubadour in Hollywood. So when you walk into this place, it's like, what the fuck is this? What's with the dinner tables and shit? So all the friends got rid of it. Get the tables out of the way because there's going to be some headbanging going on here, and we can't be doing this while, Mr. Jones is having his steak and lobster. It's just not going to happen.
You don't put chairs in the front row. That's the worst thing that you could do.
And the stage diving and the incredible headbanging that took place, they quickly abandoned the table and chairs for, an open pit. And that's what started the open pits in Hollywood.
For our scene and what we were doing, no club was going to book us because you had stage diving.
The slamming came into place in Hollywood. A lot of the clubs started banding. We were fortunate that we were one of the bands that didn't get banned because I guess our sound was a little more classic. But Abattoir for sure was one of the bands that had more of a violent crowd. A lot of fans from East LA area, and Yeah, I wasn't at the band at the time, but when they played the Roxy, immediately it's like they couldn't play there anymore.
Yeah, we're not having to risk getting hit with lawsuits, and Los Angeles is loaded with lawyers that are just itching to issue a club. All right, kid broke his leg, kid broke his arm. We're suing you, and we're gonna pay for his medical bills. And I'm sure that's happened.
Balboa Theater, which is total South Central, scary gang fucking Crips neighborhood, and you have all these like Mexican and white kids, long hair guys walking through these places. And the Olympic, I mean, I've never seen Slayer there, and it was scary. Then, I mean, I'm surprised my parents even fucking let us do that.
But why risk getting hit with a lawsuit, getting potentially shut down, getting our liquor license taken away if we book these bands?
The guy climbed the rafter and it started crawling across the stage and just stage dived to. I don't know if he got fucked up, but that was insane. And I remember the security was all suicidal tendency security guys trying to keep the people from coming on stage and thrashing the gear. Yeah, Fender's Ballroom is just a legend.
So Balboa Theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a weird
was
show.
nuts, huh?
That was a weird show. It was it was a Megadeth show, and No Mercy was playing. When we started playing, those guys, they threw the power switch off and all the fucking amps went out. And so we'd play for like 2 minutes, get the intro going, fucking everything would shut off, and they did it like 3 times to us, and then we just walked off stage.
But nothing beats the good old Troubadour days. Straight out stage diving, just insanity going on.
Iguanas in Tijuana, yeah. We played there one time. It was flooded. I mean, it was and people would jump off the balconies, and it was just like the most interesting show. As a matter of fact, we got shut down by the police there too. Get out the car and just, if you leave some money on the seat, it's gonna be okay.
The Country Club in Reseda was the premier hard rock venue in Los Angeles County. The club staged some of the most historic thrash metal shows in Los Angeles in the early 80s.
And one of the key shows we did with Wasp, not only at the Troubadour, was good old Chuck Landis' Country Club. It was Abattoir, Malice, and Wasp. Yeah, once we did the shows with Wasp, right away they called us to, hey, you guys want to be on a bill with Armored Saint and Metallica, and that's right when I got Kill 'Em All, and I go, sure, why not? Let's do it.
That's what I find funny in life, is everyone has 30 years later a different interpretation of what really happened, and that's cool, But Scott tells a story about how it was strictly an Anthrax crowd, and true, there were a lot of Anthrax fans there, but there were also a lot of Striper fans there as well. And he tells a story about how every Bible we threw out, everyone came whipping back at us, and a few might have, but it's just funny to hear his side of the story.
But when we did that first Anthrax tour, I got a look at what was going on in LA. We played the Country Club with Raven. Yeah, with Raven. It was fun, man. It was you felt something was happening.
But yeah, that was a great show, man. That was. a little scary. I don't even know if I should use the word scary, but it was a little nerve-wracking.
It was the spit, okay? I looked down on my clothes, and because the drums were very close to the front of the stage, and these guys were even closer. And I remember looking at the guys, watching them spit on me.
Yeah, people were just spitting on us left and right. And, it was interesting because that's not our genre. Anthrax and Raven, but still, we're out there doing it.
While I was in Agent Steel, we opened up for Slayer there, and a rule of thumb when you open for Slayer is you just get on stage, kick ass, and get the fuck off. None of this bullshit talking in between. So we already knew that going into that show. So for Agent Steel, that was a key show for us because we want a lot of the Slayer fans over.
Many college radio stations throughout the U.S. in the early 80s gave students the opportunity to program their own metal shows. Along with the sprouting metal fanzines, college radio became vital in spreading thrash metal music throughout various communities, which simultaneously led to the birth of the U.S. indie metal label. Inspired by new wave of British heavy metal indies, Neat, HM Records, and Ebony, labels like Shrapnel, Combat, and Megaforce, as well as LA-based Metal Blade, Green World, Azra, and New Renaissance, work hand in hand with the fanzines, college radio, and independent club promoters to collectively spread thrash metal throughout the world.
KNAC, you're on the line.
Yeah, hi, this is Bonnie Revis from Huntington Beach.
Hi, Bonnie.
Hi, I was wondering, what do you think about speed metal?
I love it. God,
do you think it has a good future?
Definitely. Speed metal records are selling, and with Metallica being so big as they are on Elektra right now, I mean, I think speed metal is great. Even one thing I noticed is college radio is getting a lot more demand for speed metal now. It's like a few years ago, everybody went to hear hardcore punk bands, and now college radio is slowly switching to getting a lot of speed metal on the air. And I really do dig speed metal. Some of my favorite bands really kick out the jams in the speed metal category.
But it always bothered me really about LA because people look at it like, oh, San Francisco had all the great bands, and certainly the scene there was great. But we had such a great metal scene in LA in the early 80s. It really was an amazing time to be here. And look, starting Metal Blade, we were really lucky because between Albert Saint and Bitch and, again, like Slayer and all that stuff, there's a ton of really good heavy metal bands here that was how the label started and grew.
What happened is we had a number 6 in England. We can't get a record deal in America. Our management can't get us a record deal. So we started pressing on vinyl. And the record distributor back then said, can you bring us some more of that? That's selling really well. And I don't have money to go out and record bands. So I said, what about compilation albums? So I sold a bunch of my old vintage keyboard gear off, which I wish I hadn't, but that's another story. And started putting together tapes of people's demos and making compilation albums. And did the speed metal hell, did the metal madness, did thrash metal attack, all these kind of things. And in doing so, just was put in contact with such a great number of bands and musicians they were in the same position that we were. They just didn't have a record label. They didn't have any way of distributing their material.
This is something you didn't hear in the radio, hardly ever. Magazines supported it, the fanzines, like the one that you worked on. And, it's very underground. It was underground for the longest period of time. And that's what I noticed, when I, eventually got an opportunity to, work at Metal Blade Records. A lot of those underground bands were on the label, and I appreciated that because we could actually work with them and hopefully help them grow.
On another note, we couldn't get these magazines. American magazines, you could do, the underground magazines weren't available.
Sure.
We had Art Chalk, a couple of German, that was it.
Yeah.
And also remember back then, the labels, there was no metal labels.
That's true.
There were crunk labels.
The thrash bands, the ones that were signed, did really well, but it took a while. It took a while because you didn't have the videos. You didn't have going back to, you didn't have the overall, the hit paraders, the circus magazines. You had the more underground fanzines that would support that.
Even with thrash metal, you started having, some of the bands started kind of altering their sounds for the radio, and it's like, at least don't do that. That's one thing I never did with Dark Angel, was like try to get on the radio. It's like, at a time when it was looking like you actually probably could if you started watering down your music and, playing a good 3.5-minute song. That's when I was like, let's write 9-minute songs then,
We had gone for about 2 years being kind of underground. It was kind of like Anthrax into Megadeth into Testament. And having spent a lot of time in San Antonio, I knew that this wasn't really going to work commercially. So unfortunately with Z-Rock, in the early days, the format and the station started foundering a little bit, which was kind of unbelievable because all the bands that were gold and platinum at the time that were coming up were the Motley Crues and the White Snakes and the Quiet Riots and the Ozzy Osbourne. So they wanted to change the direction of Z-Rock a little bit and get it more mainstream and more in sync with what was happening like on MTV. I mean, you couldn't go 10 minutes without seeing Motley Crue on MTV. So they decided to change things around. The original program director left, and then they asked me to become the program director. So immediately, like the next day, I'm like, well, let's put them in all the big bands, and we'll still play all the underground bands, but we'll just play them a lot less than we were before. So I took over Z-Rock. We were down to like 1 affiliate. And within a year, we were up to 27. And that's just because we just got in sync with all the bands that we're selling.
You know, Slayer's on that label, I want to be on that label. If that band's on Megaforce, I want to be, or I want to be on Combat, or, that's what it was. All it took was one of these key bands to get signed, and then obviously it was a domino effect from that point on, and that's really all it took.
There just weren't many labels, and you had bands like Savage Grace that, yeah, they weren't thrash. Well, they started calling themselves Thrash with Class. I remember that. Yeah. And, but they were Judas Priest with lots of double bass, a little bit of Maiden in there, totally. And, it was still just good metal.
Along with fanzine publishers, DJs, and indie label owners, there were dedicated thrash metal lovers who were the most passionate and devoted fans around. Many were also avid tape traders. Tape trading was an underground metal ritual where fans recorded and traded cassette demos and live recordings to others throughout the world, resulting in a global epidemic well before today's viral. This was a key factor in launching the career of Metallica. Their 1982 No Life Till Leather demo spread like wildfire across the world and quickly became the most sought-after demo cassette. This led to the band signing with Megaforce Records less than a year later.
I loved the Metallica demos more than anything. As soon as I got them, probably from you, I received the Metallica demo. I think it was called No Life Till Leather. Right. And it was on constant heavy rotation. And at that time I had a Sony Walkman, of course. Be jogging through Hawaii listening to Metallica. I'm like, this is pumped.
In our scene, what really differentiated our scene of thrash metal was demo tape trading. Every band made a demo, sent it out to, and all of our friends were buddies that had fanzines. I remember Metal Mania up in the Bay Area. There was, there was just all these fanzines all around the world, and I realized that that's how that happened. Obviously, the Metallica No Life Till Leather demo circulated. That's what basically made them a global sensation and got them signed. So we did the same thing. We did a 3-song demo.
There were 1 or 2 people who constantly wrote to me with long lists of import albums from LA and Californian bands that were well worth checking out. So I used to actually spend a lot of time trying to hunt them down. But in terms of tape trading, I was lucky enough that a lot of bands would send through demos at the time anyway, so you were always on the case and on the ball with what was going on.
And get them from trading with. People would find out if you have certain things that they want, and he says yes. Then I started trading videos of other bands, and you could see what the people look like, how they play. And it was pretty good. It was pretty exciting at that time.
At the time, it was an underground group of people trading tapes, cool people, that you don't think there's so many other of us around who can hang with this intense music.
We were all competing for the same records, especially once the British New Wave of Metal came in. We were all trying to get to the store before the other, and even James and Lars and those guys were around. So we were all, especially Middle Earth, we were trying to get to Middle Earth before it even opened, because they had all these imports coming in, and we wanted to pick up Kerrang! Magazine.
We were focused on business, even at 19 years old. And then, like I said, with you, the underground, the fanzines is actually what made us, because they started popping up all over the country, then all over the world, and started sending the demos. If it wasn't for that, Slayer would have never got off the ground.
That support will be nothing like it. We didn't have social media. We had fanzines. We had, tape traders. It was a different world back then.
When Metallica put Kill 'Em All out, it came out nationwide, I thought the world was coming to an end. I could not believe that something this cool got signed. I don't know if I was jealous because I thought, hey, we should be doing the same thing, or I was stoked that obviously some people are getting into this music, so somebody's going to dig our music too. There was a lot of mixed emotions at that time, because at the time the Metallica demo came out, I was doing demos myself and trading them the same way Metallica and those guys were around the world and in these little fanzines, and getting good reviews from other countries, and played on some Italian radio program. So we were right alongside Metallica for a while until they just broke it out big time. So there was a lot of mixed feelings But of course, as a fan of theirs, I was extremely happy for their success.
Due to the non-existence of commercial radio play and mainstream press, continuous touring was essential in order for a thrash metal band to both achieve and maintain success.
We loved touring here so much in those days because you could stay on the road for like fucking 8 months or something.
We were young too.
Yeah.
Tour bus, sunshine. Let's go.
Yeah.
Well, we did tour with DRI. We did tour with Suicidal. Those are great tours. I mean, those were just fun. A lot of energy, man. The whole thing was just, you just felt that it was a combination of heaviness.
Our agent Andy Summers, very much had this punk rock background and or love for punk rock, and so he was very good about, especially in LA, not putting us in these hair metal venues and putting us in those places because he just knew it just did, on the onset, it just didn't look good. It wasn't right. So we would play Fender's Ballroom. We'd play, other venues. We even played, I remember some theater downtown.
Is that the Balboa Theater?
The Balboa Theater, yeah, the Balboa Theater. And then putting us on tours with like Motorhead, when we did some of those shows with them on P-Cells, was their Orgasmatron tour. And just things that were very out of the box.
There wasn't a lot of bands out there touring at the time, but you had your major bands like Megadeth and Anthrax and Slayer and all those guys, Metallica obviously, out doing a lot of touring, and they were setting the pace for us. And a tour like Possessed and Dark Angel, that's pretty underground death metal tour. So we were even more underground. Nobody knew who we were, as opposed to, like, say, a Megadeth or something, where some people might have known who they were.
And even then, as Metallica rose up and Anthrax was going out with Ozzy and doing these things, Megadeth was always this band that always had this kind of out-of-the-box punk rock thing about how we did our business. And at times it was even frustrating because you look around and you go, man, those guys are on like that tour, and they're in a tour bus and we're still in a motorhome, and what's going on? But it was cool how we built it because it was always very credible. It was never about money first, unfortunately, sometimes, because we were very poor and we were very broke for the first bunch of years. I mean, really until Countdown, we were poor, man. I mean, dirt poor. I mean, living together in rehearsal rooms and finally getting an apartment where we could live together. So we did not have a luxurious beginning by any means, But it was cool because our cred was built.
When I joined the band, one of the first tours we did was a Clash of the Titans with Anthrax and Suicidal and Slayer. And it was just like a heaven tour for the kids. And it was great for me because, like, as soon as I joined the band, boom, we're playing sold out Madison Square Garden and all this stuff. I mean, it was a big step for Megadeth, and I just happened to be there just before the big step started. So it was a perfect entrance for me to join the band.
There were some cool, fun parts about that, but there was some ridiculous stuff that happened, political stuff with a certain person.
There was a lot of drama between Suicidal and Megadeth, and Slayer was always kind of just like, whatever, you guys, we're Slayer, fuck off. No, Dave was on a sober thing, I think, and he did like the Striper thing where he announced there'll be no swearing, there'll be no drinking. We're like, But yeah, I mean, there was kind of a rival thing between, I think, Mike and Dave because of the rules, and it's like, we don't need no stinking badges,
All those metal bands were great, and the jury's out. Who is better? Who is heavier? Right. In my opinion, we always thought we were the best band, but sometime I go out there and watch Slayer, I'm like, you know what? They're kicking our ass. These guys are way more evil than we are, heavier than we are. Their shit is rad. But that was only sometimes. Sometimes we'd play and we'd be like, we're just nailing it. This is great. I'm loving it. But I have to say, Slayer really set the mood like no other band. Of course, Anthrax was fantastic, but they're a completely different world. I can't even compare. But Slayer, I thought Slayer pretty much the ultimate metal band.
Agent Steel was, we got invited to play the Montreal Heavy Metal Festival, and that was with Slayer, Metal Church, Agent Steel, and Howl's Eve. And I remember that show specifically. I became real good friends with David Wayne and that was the show they got signed to the major label with Elektra.
God, I'll tell you who was on the first tour. It was Anthrax, Overkill, and Agent Steel. I remember it was a cheese and bread tour. And literally that was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You had coffee, which was nice in the morning. That was our one good thing we could have. But and our entertainment would be watching the arguments from one of the bands. From, I think, who was it? The Agent Steel guys had some arguments. Overkill guys, we were New York guys, so we all knew each other. We were really good friends. 3 weeks of that, and then Chernobyl hits. So Chernobyl hits, and they were saying that the winds were blowing the air from over there. The winds were blowing the air, and it wasn't safe to eat anything, pretty much. They just said stay on bread and water. So then it became that. Don't walk on grass. It was insane. They told us all these things, and we were young guys. We didn't know what the hell it was. You know, we're going to die. We'll bring this home. We're going to bring this home to our families and die.
The one thing that still irks me to this day is, and this is after March of the Saint came out, and Metallica was happening, and Kill 'Em All was raging, and Metallica had that international thing going because they were one of the first bands that were really able to get all their demos internationally. And so they became this internationally known band, and we certainly were trying to do that ourselves. And we certainly got a name in Europe and Britain. And the problem is we never toured there. And we were with Q Prime, which was Cliff Bernstein, Peter Manch, who's still, some of the biggest managers of all. And we had a record deal and with Chrysalis, and we still, every time we said, okay, let's go to Europe, it costs too much money, you can't do it, we're not going to do it. And I was on the cover of Kerrang! At one point going, look, we got to go to Europe, man. What are we doing? We got to get over there. And we could not make it happen.
Metallica and Wasp, an Armored Saint tour that we did was like, it broke ground, Totally. It totally broke ground. It was like people didn't know what to expect.
People didn't know where to put us, but everybody liked us because we played with DRI, we played with Guns N' Roses, we played with Metallica, we played with all those bands. So then later on, it became more of a lane. Then came your Rage Against the Machines, and then came your Limp Bizkits and your Korns came later.
And my first concert was actually Queensryche and Suicidal Tendencies. And we were right in front of Rocky George from Suicidal Tendencies. So that was the first time I'd really seen professional guitar player play right in front of me. And that show changed my life.
We still seem to scare people. Because I remember, as you were talking, I remember some of the looks on when we opened for Queensryche, if you remember that tour. People that had no idea who we were. When this is a big arena, and I remember looking at an audience and people having this look of terror. It's just like, what's going on up there? Who are these guys? But by the end of the show, they liked it.
The craziest show we ever did was a place called the Outhouse. I don't know if you ever heard of this. It's in Lawrence, Kansas. Lawrence, Kansas is a little racist town in the middle of Kansas. They have a Klan store in the middle, down in the street. They really have a Klan store. You got to get your hoods and stuff from somewhere, so you go to the Klan store. They don't sell it as Klan material, but you look at it like you just move the little hat over a little bit. But anyway, so we played this place. It's out in the middle of a cornfield. I heard it was a passage to play there of a punk band. You open the door and you walk in from the back, and you have the drum platform. I mean, it rained that day, and the ceiling's lower than this, and it was just a miserable show. There's no backstage. We just turned around. My shoes were full of mud because we had to go through the cornfield to get here. And after the show was over, we went out, and the bus is stuck in the mud. So we go on the mic and ask the audience to come help us get our bus out the mud. So, so the audience comes and they push the bus, and mud gets on the audience, and that was the wildest show we ever did.
Arguably the biggest metal band in the world today, Metallica's humble beginnings commenced when Lars Ulrich moved from his native Denmark to Newport Beach, California in 1980 and teamed up with guitarist James Hetfield and bassist Ron McGovney in the LA suburb of Norwalk, California. A few weeks later, they added Huntington Beach-born guitar slinger Dave Mustaine.
No, never. I never thought that. And he never mentioned that he was going to form a band. He never mentioned that he played the drums or anything like that. All he seemed to be was just a fan of Diamond Head, but also everything to do with the new wave of British heavy metal. There were certain bands he really liked, certain tracks he really liked. So he was kind of an uber fan of this style of music.
How that came together was I went down to see Loris. Even though we're not playing, I usually go down, we hang out, watch soccer or do something. And he said, he talked to a guy someplace, and it was James. And James gave him a tape of Hit the Lights. And it was exactly the type of stuff we wanted to do. And he was just searching for these type of people for a long time.
He probably just absorbed the vibe of how we operated. He'd come to rehearsal and he would sit, like we'd go round to Sean's house and me and Sean would just sit in his bedroom playing the guitar and trying to write songs, So, and Lars would be over in the corner probably absorbing all this information and we just thought he was a fan who was really into it, But he was probably thinking, that's how they write the song, that's what they do. They get a riff and they say that can be how we'd work. So he probably took in all this information, and then when he went back to Los Angeles, I think he probably thought he got sufficient, information and maybe. Knowledge to think, right, I know what we need to do. We need to do this, we need to do that. And he apparently phoned up James, who he'd already met, hadn't he? And said, let's form a band.
Dropped the tape off once, and it was there for a long time. Sure. Then I learned the song, and they said, learn the solo, just put a solo on here. And I put some solo on there. So it ended up that the long solo ended up being on the record, and the short ones were substituted. I think Dave Mustaine substitute those out.
The first show that we played over there at the Troubadour was with Trauma and Bitch. And it was Trauma had brought down a humongous sound system, and 16,000 watts of sound and 8,000 watts of lights. And they're telling us, we're going to give you 60%. I said, who cares, We just went out there and we just played full blast anyway. I turned my amps up. We were just louder than hell.
I remember seeing Cliff in Trauma before he, when Cliff's band Trauma, they played the Troubadour, and I remember I saw that show with Cliff was in the band, and I remember thinking I don't remember the band much, but I remember the bass player. He had this big giant Morley wah pedal and big giant bell bottom hanging over the front of it. It was pretty impressive.
There were a couple guys sitting back at the bar, and they're going, woo, like this, and we didn't know what the hell they thought, So we got done playing our set, and all of a sudden, they come up to our dressing room, and one of them, it was Lars, he goes, the underdogs kicked major ass over the competition. And he just said, we didn't know there was another band out there like us that played. He says, we played in a band called Metallica. So, I had to go check them out the following month over at the Troubadour at the Thanksgiving show, and I was really impressed.
Actually, they were in a hurry to get it done, and James and Lars came over. I guess he calls me and says he's coming over because he wants his solo done, because some guy he met at a concert is doing a compilation album, and he wants to get this on there. So they both came over and sat on the couch, and I have this little Montgomery Wards. You heard of that store? They're out of business. Okay, but Metallica survived. So we have this Montgomery Wards amp. It's really small, like 1 feet this way, 1 feet that way. So I plugged in my little Montgomery Wards amp that I used to practice with, and put some distortion and a little other effects on there, and wail out a solo.
That became the iconic solo.
Yeah, I guess. I wish I would have had time to do a better one.
We had seen Mustaine at the Troubadour. This was the very, very, very first time that we saw Metallica, and it was literally, and I'm not kidding, they were like really, really loud, but not as loud as Motorhead, but they were pretty fucking loud, and it was literally like they opened the door and you could just fucking hear like this just amazing, like I'd never heard anything like that before, and we were like, what, okay, this is kind of new, you know?
Heavy metal was kind of down and slow and like motorcycle music kind of thing.
Right.
I didn't really care about that. I was into the punk element, but I also was into like cool guitar element.
Right.
Metallica was the first time I heard the punk element plus the new wave of British heavy metal put together. I'm like, this is it. I loved it.
Metallica actually, for Ride the Lightning, they wanted to get John Bush in the band. And I remember talking to James about it, drinking some beers, eating burritos, whatever. I was in some park with them on a bench. We had a boombox and we were listening to tunes and just trying to think who was there. It was me, James, my cousin Debbie, who was kind of going out with them. And he was telling me that they're going to get John Bush in the band. I was like, what? No way, you're tripping.
I knew Metallica, and I certainly appreciated them. And we became friends with those guys during that time as well. But I didn't want to just go join Metallica because Armored Saint was happening. That was my band. That was the band I was in. So for me to go and join Metallica it didn't make any sense. There was really no reason for me to do that. My other band, the band I was in, was doing well. And it wasn't like Metallica was at the Master of Puppets level. I always make the joke it would have been a much bigger mistake for me not to join Anthrax than it would have been for me to join Metallica. Because Anthrax, when I joined Anthrax in 1992, was already a very established band. So that was an easy, logical decision. Metallica, although was ahead of Armored Saint by all means at that point, wasn't still, they were here and we were there. It wasn't like it was here and here. It was here and here. So for me, it didn't make sense to go, I'm abandoning my friends to go join this band. I don't really want to do that.
I'm glad that didn't happen. Yeah. I mean, John would have been killer, actually, but, James became...
James is probably the one guy in rock, maybe history, who really, really evolved as a singer. And I'm not just brown-nosing, I mean it. Like, you listen to Kill 'Em All, and then you listen to Black Album, you're like, oh my, that's not the same person.
Back in the Kerrang days, and I'm talking about 83, 84, I do remember that most of us felt the likes of Slayer were a bit of not a joke, but they weren't going to be around for very long because it was all a bit, how fast can we play, and then it'll be burnout time. Whereas we all thought the likes of The Crew, Rat, were going to be around for a long time. Of course, what we didn't actually put into the equation was the fact that The Crew and Rat were on a complete self-destruct path, whereas the likes of Metallica and Slayer did have a real vision and a real determination and a focus on where they wanted to go. Were we ever of the opinion that Metallica and Slayer, especially Metallica, are going to be huge? No. But now in retrospect, you look at someone like Lars Ulrich and the way he drove that band and had such a business determination.
The Kerrang actually came out to write an article at that point. San Diego was the first show. The barricade broke after like our second or third song, and the crowd was going bananas, and they were going, whoa, like Armored Saint blew Metallica away. Wow, what? Because Metallica at that point was way more popular in Europe in particular, and they were flabbergasted. The next night, another mistake that should have been the right turn instead of the left, we said, well, we're going to headline LA. That's our hometown, so we're going to headline, and Metallica will go on before us. Well, that was a big mistake, because then they came on and just destroyed us.
The next day, we played the Palladium, and I think that's when Metallica just like wanted to teach us a lesson, and they kind of did. I was
we just did Rock in Rio with Metallica guys and 88,000 people, and we went on right before Metallica, and there's still like that thread. There's no way you're gonna blow away Metallica or anything, but I mean, you're gonna fucking try, motherfuckers. It's like, you want a piece of our band? All right, here you go, motherfuckers. We're gonna give it a go.
One day, my cousins were telling me about Metallica when Master of Puppets came out, and my cousin Natalie set me down. She said, "Have you heard this yet?" And I said, "No." And she said, "All right, I'll see you later." And she put on Master of Puppets, and she just shut the door, and like I came out of that room a different person.
We we done a couple of shows in '82 in the east coast of America, and Johnny C said, I want to bring you back and do a full tour. And I've got the biggest band in San Francisco opening for you. We're like, Y&T? He's like, no, Metallica. We're like, who? So we got a copy of No Life to Leather, put it on, it was like, alright, these guys will do. This is cool. You know, like Motorhead on crack or something, you know. So we got to Johnny C's, flew over, met these guys, and they were all obnoxious, drinking, smashing shit up. It's like, oh god, this is gonna be fun. So with bands and crew, 17 people in a 6-berth Winnebago conquering America. The smells were atrocious, let me tell you.
They started that thing, Dave and Hetfield, and I would have never thought, because when I first heard it, I was like, man, it's like white noise. But it's only white noise if somebody doesn't know how to mix it, either live or in the studio. So, and as it progressed, people learned how to do it. And I'll tell you, man, when we released Peace Sells, I thought it was good. I didn't think it was going to be as, have legs like it still does. But when I heard Master of Puppets, man, I was like, damn, I didn't use that.
And it culminated with that one big show at Roseland in New York with us, Metallica and Anthrax, and all 3 bands got major deals from that.
I mean, he got in touch and said, we want to cover Am I Evil, and we sent over the lyrics, and they put it on the Creeping Death 12-inch single in 1984. And then, so that was great, but they were still on a small label, Music for Nations, small independent label in England. So they still hadn't conquered the world at this point, had they? They were a little band. It probably dawned on me that how big they were when Master of Puppets had sold 1 million copies. And I started to think, good grief, Metallica's much bigger than Diamond had ever were. How's this happened?
Listen, I don't know, you're fucking 19 years old. I mean, I don't think you ever really think about this shit. You just do. You don't think. You know what I mean? So I can sit here and give you my kind of 30-year later thoughts. I just, at that time, like I said, I was just so impulsive, and I'm not sure that I ever sat down and kind of really just digested all of it.
It's great that Diamond is still going, and I think part of the reason it's still going is Metallica. Without their, mentioning us and covering 4 Diamond songs, I don't think we'd be having this conversation, really. I think the band would have faded away, really.
Slayer was formed in the East LA suburb of Huntington Park in 1981 by Kerry King, Dave Lombardo, Jeff Hanneman, and Tom Araya. The group started out as a metal cover act at the Woodstock Club in Anaheim, yet quickly ascended to be the most definitive thrash metal band in the world.
It was me and Kerry that basically created the whole thing. The image, the look, we worked day and night on it. Well, obviously, we were at your house half the time.
The first time I saw them, they were doing mostly covers. They were doing like Deep Purple covers and Judas Priest covers. Yeah, they were doing I think Rapid Fire.
Yeah.
They were awesome, though, for what they were doing. I remember watching Lombardo thinking, this kid's got talent.
I would actually go, and I went and talked to Radio City and the Woodstock Concert Theater, and would get nights for myself. And usually it was an off night, but I was go under SC Productions, and I would hire local bands to come in, and just as a promoter. And so I talked to Kerry King, hired him for the show, and that night it sparked between us. I saw something. Now they were just basically covers, and I think they had 3 originals they were playing live.
They were doing a lot of Judas Priest covers back then, and they could rip off Judas Priest like lick for lick. In fact, Aggressive Perfector is kind of a takeoff on Dissident Aggressor. So, yeah, I gotta be honest, man. The first time Slagle had me work with them, I kind of didn't get it. I didn't get it. I go, what the hell do you see in these guys, man?
As a band, that you could feel the chemistry with them. And that night, after the show, I talked to Kerry, and we agreed that I would just come in and work with them exclusively. So I shut everything down, the production company and all, and started working on them.
Yeah, Slayer, I mean, they were playing Radio City a lot, and they were doing the whole makeup thing and everything, and, you know, it's like trying to be a little, you know, just trying to do something different.
Jeff was mainly into punk, so the influence didn't come from there. It was mainly Gary. And Dave was into Motorhead and AC/DC. Tom was into the Doors. Obviously, you know that one too, huh?
Oh, yeah.
It used to drive us nuts. We'd go to sound checks, and you'd sit there and start reciting the Lizard King.
I remember Kerry calling me up, and they couldn't get into the Troubadour because I guess they were too heavy. You know, Gina, the booking agent, was scared, and Kerry, man, get us on a bill. Used to call me up, and so I called Gina. I go, listen, you got to get these guys on here. So it was just one of the most brutal shows. It was Abattoir opening, Wasp played second, and Slayer, this was on their first album, closed off the show. And there was a line, I'm not even kidding you, that was just wrapped around Santa Monica Boulevard for that show.
We rented our own halls.
That's right.
We would rent like the VFW hall, UAW hall, right there, border Alameda, you know. Because you cross the tracks, it's the bad part of town, you know. And I remember us, you know, selling tickets and, you know, flyering the lockers, you know, on high school campuses all over the area. You know, we just late at night, we would go in with a stack of flyers and go to every single locker. And at that time, you know, the campuses were open. You could just walk right in at any time of the night. And I remember it was Kerry's friend. I forget the guy's name. He had a Jeep, and he had like a microphone or some kind of like a CB radio with some kind of horn, like a bullhorn or whatever. And we would drive down the street, Slayer performing at the VFW hall on Santa Fe in Southgate. You know,
All the halls were the best shows because we could do anything we wanted. It was the very last show we did at the URWA hall, and Show No Mercy was just getting ready to come out. We'd already done Metal Massacre, but Show No Mercy was coming out. And so we had developed a name. This place was packed. It held like 4,000 people in there. Packed. So we were experimenting again, right? We had these two big giant upside down crosses on stage, and they were soaked in kerosene, right? So we're getting ready to go on, getting ready to light these things off, and I look out, and all I see is red and blue lights down the windows. People were busting the windows, climbing into the show from there. And I look outside, and the whole street is nothing but cop cars. And I remember I looked at the band, I'm like, we gotta go right now. They're like, what about the equipment? Forget it, we gotta leave it. Can you imagine what's gonna happen when this whole police force walks in here, sees two upside down burning crosses on stage? We're all going to jail. So we left the equipment. They took their guitars, that was it. All the equipment stayed.
I just remember the goal being, well, this is fast, but it's not as fast as Metallica. So that was like a goal for them. They wanted to be the fastest, they wanted to be the heaviest, and I think they did a pretty damn good job. But like I said, man, that was Mr. Slagle's vision, because I was just like, I'm not too sure what you see in these guys, Brian, but you know, I'll do it. And thank God I did. You know?
When Slayer went into the studio, it was, again, very professional. Everybody was there to do their job and to do it good. Whereas Dark Angel went in, they screwed off, fucked off all the time, and put out a sloppy album.
I played Dark Angel songs with Slayer before I ever played them with Dark Angel. Wow. Crazy.
They were a handful in the studio. They would come in and there was one session that they had water pistols, and they were running around squirting each other with water pistols when I have all this expensive equipment in this fucking control room. And they were in the control room shooting each other, you know, but you know, no matter how much fun they had, how much, you know, let's smell each other's farts and things like that, when the red button was on, they did their stuff. I mean, that's when they focused. I don't think anything was more than 2 takes.
Everybody loves The Final Command, which wasn't supposed to be on the first record.
That's right. There was another track that.
Simple Deception. It was one of Jeff's tracks, which I still to this day wish they would have put it on, like when they did that one big box set of theirs.
Right.
I wish it would have made it, because it was a very good song.
There was just so much cymbal bleed when we had the drums in the live room the first time that, I kind of said, well, it'd be kind of cool if we could just overdub the cymbals so they're not bleeding into all the rest of the mics. I said, do you think you could do that, Dave? And he's like, well, I could try. And now that you think back, I mean, that was an enormous thing to ask a drummer to do. Don't hit the cymbals. And then overdub the cymbals, come back and do them later. But it was incredible that he pulled it off. I mean, I listen to Show No Mercy today and I still can't tell.
When Kerry and Jeff came into the rehearsal studio, they knew what they wanted. And they would tell Dave, they'd actually even get up there and show him, this is what we want, for a rhythm. Tom would get involved with lyrics periodically, not much. It was the Kerry and Jeff show.
Right.
And Jeff, they're two different songwriters now. Jeff is all from feel. It's from the inside. Kerry is very technical, and you can tell in his writing.
Slayer was the band that stayed in LA. They didn't leave, and Slayer still developed their own niche. And if you compare Slayer and Metallica, they're very different. Back then, they were very, and still to this day, they're very different.
And even Slayer, it's kind of funny. People don't ever, not that Slayer ever didn't say they were from LA, but they don't really get that much credit for being like an LA metal band, really.
And the guys in Slayer were really cool. And that's what really, that makes such a difference. Of you meet some band that you love and you listen to all the time. It's like the soundtrack to your life. And you meet them and you say, hey, can you sign my CD? And they're complete assholes to you. And you never listen to them again. Right. I remember Jeff Hanneman even, we were like, oh man, we got our CD signed by everybody. Where's Jeff? And he's getting in that car leaving. And they went and got him and said, hey, sign these guys' CDs. And he stops what he's doing. Gets out of the car, takes a picture with us, and signs the CDs, and that's the kind of stuff that makes you fans for life.
Hanneman shaving his head and bringing all those punk albums to the studio was life-changing for me. That was just one of those moments that changed everything.
Yeah.
My whole perception of music, my approach, it fed my anger, and my aggression. It's like, fuck, this music there has to be harder and faster music.
Yeah.
And I kept going to these mom and pop record stores and, looking up different bands that had that drive and that energy.
And then my friends took me to go see a Slayer show because I was in punk rock and they were in the heavy metal, so they took me to see Slayer. And actually on that Slayer bill was Agent Steel, Omen, and Slayer at the country club. And I go there, and I'm seeing all these long hairs like slam dancing and stuff like that. I'm telling my friends, like, you guys make fun of me at school when I'm doing that. What's up with that? I was like, there's a bunch of long hair slam dancing. What's up with that? And I guess that's when everything started like changing over.
I mean, you look back at that, wow, we were so young. It was amazing. We were fearless.
Right.
That's one thing I think that's lacking in today's music is that people are afraid to take chances, and we didn't care what anybody thought. We played our music. We played it hard. We played it fast. And even though it was a mixture of metal and punk, we were clearly advocates of that, that union of aggressive music.
In 1983, after his departure from Metallica, guitarist Dave Mustaine teamed up with myself, bassist David Ellison, and introduced his new band Megadeth to the world. Perhaps the most original and thought-provoking act of that era, we soon enlisted guitarist Chris Poland and drummer Garth Sanders, infusing jazz and fusion styling with a no-holds-barred thrash metal assault, which established our band as the most technically proficient of all speed and thrash metal bands. The first 3 shows, it was me and Dave, a drummer named Lee Rausch, who played with us just for a short period in 1984, late 83 and 84. And then we had Kerry King come in and play guitar with us. We borrowed Marshalls from everybody we knew, you know. We had Dave's Marshalls. We bought some out of the Recycler, which is the local classified magazine in LA. We borrowed Kerry's. We called Jim from Dark Angel. I mean, Juan from, at the time, Abattoir, you know. So we called everybody we could to get some Marshalls for our backline, which was great.
I always thought it was sad that Ron didn't go on and do something or, you know, start his own badass band, because he could. He knew what he's doing. I mean, those guys, the thing about Ron and even James and even Mustaine, those guys had great musical taste. You know, so there's no reason Ron shouldn't have been doing something too. That's that was just my personal thing. But I don't think he had that attitude that you kind of need to go in there and just grab the bull by the horns. I think that's why Mustaine ended up doing what he did. He always had that. Yeah, I mean, even when he was living in Huntington Beach and we'd party at his apartment, he would be running the party himself. You know, it's like he always had that attitude. So it was good. Good. I mean, that's why I'm so proud of that dude. He kicks ass.
But I think it was that rawness, that it was genuine, you know, and you could really hear. You could just hear the raw power and just the aggression and how pissed off we were in the music, and it's like that was what the fans wanted to hear, and that's what they connected with. It wasn't the high dollar and the gloss and all this other stuff that they connected with. They loved about Megadeth that we were this band that was just really that we were just it really had this punk feel to it, and it's like I think that probably was the endearing quality to Los Angeles for Megadeth.
Gar, I learned how to play guitar with Gar, and we learned, I learned a lot from him, and I was like, if you're gonna go in that band, I am too, man. So that's kind of what it was. But it's not like I didn't like the music. It's just that when it first came out, I think people had a problem with how to mix it, because a lot of times, like, you'd see a band and you'd be like going, I can't hear anything.
I was in a Megadeth for a short period and got to play with Dave, who I think is one of the most creative songwriters of all time in the genre of metal. I think he's really the grandfather of speed metal and thrash metal.
We recorded that record for Relativity, right. And then Combat, and then Capitol just came in and bought it out. I think somebody, did the math and said, Metallica's taken off. This guy wrote half of their songs. Why don't we pick this record up? And that's how it happened. It's just like that, man.
When I had the chance to join Megadeth and I actually played with those guys, it was very natural because we were all doing the same thing, just intense, just music that friggin' kills, you know what I mean? And so we all had the same kind of goal. We all knew what we wanted. It was very, very natural. And I enjoyed every second of it.
We were going to do a record with Dave Mustaine. I met Dave Mustaine in the mid-'80s. Me and Ice were going to do a record with him.
I remember when I first met Dave Mustaine, it was at the show when we opened for Metallica, and I remember this guy rolling up in a moped. And behind the country car, and it was Dave Mustaine, and he was yelling at Lars for something. I don't even remember the whole scene, but I go, this guy's kind of cool, man. And so we started hanging out with Mustaine, and we used to rehearse in the same area. Yeah, Vernon and this other place in Hollywood. I was there when they recorded "Killing Is My Business" up in Indigo Ranch in Malibu. They had Chris Poland playing guitar, and ironically enough, I bought my first BC Rich guitar from Chris Poland, which I still have.
It was just a whole lot at that time, and we never got together. But Dave's always been a friend. He's always been cool with me, and I still like him to this day.
But yeah, Megadeth essentially, we became a 4-piece. Went from a 5 to a 3 to a 4, and and Kerry, we're thinking about people to have come in and play, and Kerry's name came up, and he was really into it. He always said he saw Dave play with Metallica opening for Saxon at the Whiskey a year or two earlier, and how it changed his life. So Kerry was definitely a fan of that era of Dave's participation with Megadeth and his guitar playing, so it was great. And man, Kerry came in and he really just fundamentally understood how Dave played, so we pretty quickly rehearsed, put the show together. We built this show actually at Kerry's house.
I remember him saying, if there's anything I can do for you, if you want me to write or you want me to produce you or play on an album, or you know, if I can help in any way, just let me know. And I thought that's, you know, very kind offer from a guy who's obviously very busy and got his own stuff to take care of. But he was there offering his services. And then he ended up playing on our album Death and Progress. And he produced the track as well, so he's on the album credited, and that was really nice as well to have Dave Mustaine in our camp as well. So between Metallica and Megadeth, you know, we were getting a lot of high praise from some well-respected, successful musicians.
You know, in all the bands, you know, growing up, playing with Gar, and any of the bands we were in, he was the artist. He was the guy. He played drums, but he would pick up a guitar and he wrote songs for the New Yorkers that were our best songs.
You know, and I always say Megadeth was a very intentional band. We weren't this kind of loosey-goosey, let's jam and see what happens.
Right.
We had the band formulated before we even played a note.
I was in Megadeth, but it was kind of like, you know, Dave's thing, you know what I mean? So, you know, he would throw you a bone and you do a harmony here, and, you know, like Gar made the suggestion to edit down Peace Cells because it was like over 7 minutes long.
Was it?
Yeah, Gar said, man, that song's way too good to be that long. And so him and Gar, you know, Gar said, why don't we do blah, 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 and there it was. And if that song was 7 minutes long, I'm not sure that a record company would have been smart enough to edit it down.
Although not considered thrash metal by any standard, Pasadena-based quintet Armored Saint introduced an audacious style of British-influenced metal, inciting an aggressive fan base that ultimately forced Hollywood supper clubs like the Troubadour to permanently remove the tables and chairs from their venues.
God, Armored Saint was so awesome. I remember seeing them at the country club before they got signed, or March of the Saint. They were one of my favorites in LA.
I grew up in a very quaint and small community at northeast LA called El Sereno that has sort of made its historical mark because of so many musicians that came out of that town. And this was in like 1979, I would say, when it began. I started hanging out with a mob of guys, these rock and rollers, who eventually became the band Armored Saint. And we were sort of like the kids who were underneath them. But these kids showed me this incredible world of rock and roll that I never knew about. You know, I was into big rock and roll records at the time, sure. Everybody was into Floyd and the Van Halens and the, you know, all the Ted Nugent records. But these kids, they brought that world and sort of laid it on my lap. It was like all of a sudden it became real to me because they started taking me to these shows in Pasadena at the Ice House, at the Oddfellows Temple. And this was even before the famous Pookie's Club. But we saw bands like Snow and Smile and A La Carte. And that was really my first live experience. It wasn't even the big concerts. I had still yet to go to a big show.
When we did the show with Armored Saint, like you were talking about, it was a battle of the bands. And we got up into like the top 5. And it was the last show. And Armored Saint won it. And then the judges come to us afterwards and they give you your score sheets and all that. And the guy just sat there and told us flat out, he says, just give it up. You're never going to make it. This type of music died with Cheer in the 60s. It was very discouraging, but you know, we stuck to our guns. We believed in what we were doing and just kept pushing on.
We went over to this club, you know, Woodstock in Anaheim. And it was like a Thursday night or something. And Armored Saint was playing, and I mean, the band seemed like so fucking good to me, you know, like the 2 guitars and the harmony leads and shit. And there was a lot of chicks there too. Right? And it wasn't that many people. I mean, there was probably 40-ish people there, just real dead. There was some hot-looking chicks there, and they were like up in front, and that was just really a lot more of what I wanted to be doing. You know, the punk rock scene wasn't. Very few chicks there, seemed like at that point, you know, and it's just kind of the whole vibe of that, you know, with punk stuff. It's all about bringing your own shit in and no roadies. That was a thing, you know. That's rock star shit. Can't have fucking roadies, you know. And
the one legendary party I'll never forget was at Betsy's mom's house in North Hollywood. It was Bitch, Armored Saint, and Metallica. I remember passing out on the couch at one point, and I kind of like woke up, and I heard the Motorhead doing Ace of Spades on the stereo, and I just see we used to do dog piles then. That was the big thing, dog pile. So I see this gigantic dog pile. The entire room is just filled with people. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? So that was kind of towards the end of the evening when I was a little too drunk, and what happened was I had no idea, but Armored Saint was playing a show the next night, and we go to the show, and Phil, guitar player for Armored Saint, is sitting on a stool with his foot all bandaged up, and so what happened? Apparently he was on the bottom of the dog pile, and he claims, and we don't know, but he claims that Dave Mustaine, I guess, was the one that hit his ankle and somehow broke it some way. He at the time they were wondering, did Dave do that on purpose for some reason or not?
Despite thrash metal's crusade against glam rock, one thing the two musical genres shared was the sheer decadence often associated with rock and rollers of all stripes. Intimidation and ongoing violence occurred on and off the stage, while liquor-fueled gatherings ensued after thrash metal performances, creating havoc and mayhem. By the time the mid-'80s rolled around, more and more punk fans were attending thrash metal events in Los Angeles, which prompted LA street gangs to attend in full force, resulting in many ultra-violent affairs.
We're here to create chaos and mayhem. We're here for slam pits. We're here to, fuck yeah, man! Celtic Frost, creator, destruction, that's what we're there for.
We had a pretty big following in L.A. Right. Outside L.A. was still kind of iffy. Yeah. So, because we did when I joined, we did a U.S. tour, and I think one of the bigger places were like Boston at that point, and San Francisco. Of course, we ended up playing San Francisco a lot in the Bay Area, and then that whole thing about the banning thing came too, so that kind of put a hold on a lot of our growth in LA.
When getting banned in LA, yeah, we were proud of that, but then we walked away from our label and sealed our fate. So now we're banned from every club. We have no record label, so we continued on for another year pretending to be signed, and at the same time, the squabbling begins and the finger pointing, and we pretty much we all just walked away from the project.
It's really stupid because there was no reason for it. It wasn't like there was an incident that happened. They were saying, "Oh, see what happens when they play." It was people were worried about what could happen. It was the potential, so. But yet we play all these other places around the country and the world, and it was never a problem. But they were.
And that was like a 5-year ban or something.
Yeah, it was a while. It was pretty ridiculous.
We get the crowd into a frenzy, and I would light everything at one time. Well, when I did that at the Troubadour, I burnt every color cell and every light. Now, if you remember Slayer, we had our own lighting rig, so it didn't affect us. Well, when Wasp came on, they had no lights. So after the show, the managers come down, call me upstairs, took my picture, made me sign this paper, said I'm not allowed in the club ever again.
I've had my back sliced up, I've had my face swollen out to here, and I've had hair pulled out of my head, I've had earrings ripped out of my ears, and it's all for the love of music, and you knew what you were getting into in those shows, and I knew what I was getting into because we'd go on the show and I say, okay, I'm going up front. My friends would say, oh man, okay, and we'd go up front because there was no way I was staying in the back. I was going as close as I could and taking those photos, and it was dangerous, and that's what actually fueled us, like the danger was part of the excitement.
We did a festival in Holland, and we went out there, and the whole crowd was chanting F Striper, F Striper, F Striper. The crowd hated us, and it appeared that they wanted to kill us. And they had a cross burning with Robert's head on a woman in a bikini. It was just weird, and they're ripping the thing apart. It was
helping us with eggs and
it was insanity. So we went out there to play this gig, and we wanted to kill our booking agent, John Huey, because we're like, why are you booking us on this? But then as we realized, okay, we're here for a reason, we're here for a purpose. We went out, we changed, we pulled the ballads out of the set, you know, and we put in some heavier songs. And we went out, and after 3 or 4 songs, won the crowd over. The whole crowd was banging their heads to us and came up to us after the show, so we had no idea.
Well, they told us, you know, what you shouldn't do to like a younger band like us is tell us rules that there's no swearing, you know, don't drink or smoke around the band. And we're like, oh, it's on. So, you know, we were backstage going, fuck, shit. You know, just being rebellious and getting beers. And I mean, we were wasted before we went on. So, and we ended up recording a record live in Eindhoven.
And something I remember about that show, I don't know if Michael saw it, but we're playing this song and Michael's kind of going down like this, and a giant chain with a padlock flew over his head and ended up hitting me on my left foot on my drum riser, on my hi-hat foot. And he didn't see it, and I went, ow, what's that? And I'm playing, and I look down, and then I hear a crash, and a full jar of mayonnaise.
They were throwing bottles,
smashed against the wall. It would have killed both of us.
Food, bottles, they were just throwing everything, but only up until 3 or 4 songs, and then they stopped because they were into us. We won them over.
And it was a COC, DRI, Anthrax, and Overkill. And this was that time where I'm like, okay, can we all get along? But there were other shows that were booked together, all these different types of bands. You know, Motorhead would play on punk shows. There was no problem there. But that particular show, that got out of control. And there were crazy pits, but then, yeah, a lot of violence.
You go on stage, you see, I mean, you watch the other bands and you see the fights in the crowd. When you're actually on the stage, and it was just blood. It was just brutal blood, man, just fights, and just, there was no control.
Right.
There was no control of that show. It got a little hairy, like where you feel, all right, when should we leave? When I have this piece of wood in my hand, you're playing a bass, that's all I have to protect me, and it's locked on me with this strap.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I do recall absolutely that all those chairs and tables left after one particular night at the Troubadour when all hell broke loose, and yours truly here took a stage dive into a table full of drinks and beautiful women, and I just destroyed that entire table. And I remember having to be smuggled out of the club or killed by the encroaching security guards who were looking all over for me.
We were kind of apprehensive and scared to go play those shows with Suicidal because they were more about, they would bring guns and knives out. And it was like they had, you know, like they got guns in their back, they're loading their guns right now. We're like, what? Guns? What the hell?
I mean, I saw Hyrax right off the bat. It's my first LA metal experience, so I remember them. I remember Caden. I remember Bombs of Death. I remember all that stuff. So, but then the first shows we played down here was after Debbie started managing us, and we got asked to play with Dark Angel at Fender's Ballroom. And then we came back and did Voivod Violence, because we did a tour, like a little West Coast tour with them. And I just remember the Bay Area scene, okay, it was brutal, it was all that stuff. But the violence, I thought the violence at the LA shit was crazy. Like, the Satanic Hispanic had not been named that yet, but it was like, these fucking guys, like, they'll just try to take each other out.
Yeah.
The Bay Area, they kind of more helped you around the pit, and here they were just more like, they were coming at you. And then the suicidal factor and all that stuff.
Actually, this poser dude pulled the switchblade out on me at one show. I forgot who it was. And I think I called him a poser, and he just pulled a knife on me, and I was like, whoa. You know, sorry. Then I realized, like, hey, I'm not really not a tough guy like that. I shouldn't say shit like that. You know, I'm just a music. I love metal, and I think we ended up like getting drunk together at the end of the night. So, but he was like this guy. He looked like a total LA glam dude, blonde hair, you know, just. But he had a wild side to this guy.
Back in the 80s, the biggest problem with Hyrax, and I attribute to like not being as big as some of those bands, is that we partied way too hard. And there's a lot of bands that talk about that shit. All did. Yeah, but even the ones that party too hard, you still got to be able to function. We weren't functioning. We weren't showing up for interviews. We weren't, you know, talking to the record company people.
My job in the band was to see what I could find, and I had this I had this theory that at any major city I go to, if I go to Central, First, Second, and Third, that's where I'm going to find whatever it is I'm looking for. And it usually worked every time.
Well, it's crazy. I think that, I don't know why, like it probably had to do with the hair bands, but everybody thought that it wasn't that wild. But if you went to a thrash metal show, especially if you put them with thrash metal bands, were probably the most brutal and gnarly shows ever. The difference though with LA is that you didn't have, like it's in San Francisco, it is more open-minded.
Yeah.
It still is.
But when you were there, everyone was there for the number one reason was the music. And it was great to be part of that, especially being a teenager. And then when you're playing these songs that you run in the garage with the rest of the guys, and you're on stage, and people buy your records, and they're singing your songs, and they're stage diving, and they're slamming, it's got violent at times, but it was always more exciting. Like, I think everyone was just so excited that they were part of this and enjoying it, and they were surrounded by people who were enjoying the same thing they were. So it's just, you had to be there to understand like how amazing it was.
The 80s ushered in a vast array of popular musical genres, ranging from punk, new wave, ska, and rockabilly to pop, glam metal, and electronica. Yet many of these genres were unable to withstand the changing musical climate of the 90s and beyond. But thrash metal, the most underground and unorthodox of all, weathered the 90s grunge, alternative, and hip-hop movements, while withstanding the drama and drug addiction that plagued many of the more traditional 80s and 90s bands. Thrash metal music is arguably more popular today than ever before, and the thrash pioneers of the early 80s still reign supreme today.
The 90s were so weird because nobody really knew where's it gonna go next, and what's the next trend, and what should we do, because we knew nobody wanted us anymore, nobody wanted to hear about heavy metal. Everybody was focusing on grunge and that new style, and so nobody of these traditional 80s bands knew quite what to do with themselves. Should they change and adapt, or should they just go away? And I guess we all tried various degrees of adaptation and changed our looks a little bit, and even tried to write slightly different songs, but we tried to walk that fine line of pleasing the new times a little bit, but staying true to yourself, and that is always very hard to do.
Sure.
And I guess most bands pretty much failed in that time to make any meaningful albums, and I know we did.
We put out the Time Is Not Heal record, and that record, we worked with Terry Date, and that was like a big big name producer at the time, and that was like a big deal for Combat to have done something like that. And, it just seemed kind of stupid because it's like they shot their whole wad doing the record, and then we had a big tour booked in the U.S., and then all of a sudden you find out we weren't getting more tour support. So it's like, on the eve, the first tour for the new record, and all of a sudden we're not going to do it. And so then things just really hit the skids with the label at that point, and that just kind of threw everything into stagnation, and then, they 93 or something, or 92, that was the grunge era really hit, and that just kind of really put a fork in the whole thing. Because then it was like, we're trying to jump, we want to jump on another label, and it's like the metal stuff was just, was fucking, nobody wanted to touch it really at that point.
Even though I separated myself from the whole thing, I'm happy that they made it, that they had the longevity they did. Because, like I said, we were family at one time. And it's funny because people are always asking me, do you have any regrets? Not a single one. They made it. What I helped start succeeded. And I can take the pleasure in that, knowing that.
And we see more and more young faces in the audience, and people, who were not even born by the time, we called it quits in the 90s.
Yeah. Then a lot of kids played it on the games.
Yeah.
On Guitar Hero.
Really?
Yeah, they discovered Balls to the Wall was on there and Fast as a Shark.
I remember hearing, thrash metal. I was like, it will never get any heavier than this. This is the heaviest music can be. Just like, a couple years before that, I said there's never going to be double bass any faster than Fast as a Shark from Accept. This is the apex. Nobody can play. I'm surprised this guy can play this fast. Nobody's ever going to be able to play double bass as fast as this. And I became one of those guys a few years later. You know, it doesn't matter how extreme your music is. There's going to be something that comes along some other time later on that makes your music look like Britney Spears or something. And, you know, be ready for it, you little whippersnappers.
We're proud of it, you know. LA had its punk scene, or had a punk scene during that period. Sure. Yeah, and also, you know, Suicidal was there. Right. You know, there was a lot of bands. Dark Angel, I think, was from Southern California. High Rocks, I think, as well. Yeah. You know, so there was no reason for us to live. I mean, we loved it there, and I still love it there.
I've always been amazed how much credit sometimes people will try to give me when I'm going, I just worked with some great bands. I didn't write the music. I just set up the mics and try to make it sound good, you know, and just guide them along the way. But, you know, I'm always just trying to get their ideas onto tape. So, again, I've just been lucky enough to work with some damn good bands in my career.
You know how there's certain bands that have those real loyal fans, real tunnel vision. They come there just to see them, you know, like AC/DC or like Motorhead fans or Slayer fans, Suicidal fans. They just want to come there. They come there just to see that, and they don't want to hear anything else. And that's, you know, if you can get them to stop chanting the other band, if you're opening for a band like that, it's good. You know what I mean? Because that's hard.
And you got there early to see all the bands because there was always good bands and bands supported each other, which was great. And then the fans would get involved in it. And, you know, it wasn't like when you were in the pit, people punching you. You went in a circle and you had fun. Someone fell down, you pick them up. So even though it looked violent, it was still a community where people cared about each other and they were all there for the sole purpose of to listen to all the bands that were there. And that's what I miss. That's why it was so fucking awesome to be a band that was part of that.
Last Tuesday we played The Baked Potato. 2 guys fly in from Brazil, 2 guys fly in from Liverpool, Megadeth fans. We heard you were playing here. You know, it's like, how can you stop a Megadeth fan? It's like, they're the best fans in the world, so I just want to say thanks.
And so in some ways, because we stayed behind in LA, and Slayer was born here in LA as a band, I think maybe there's a connection to LA in a very different, unique way than probably any other band that's ever come out of and formed here in this city.
So comfortable with the term heavy metal. I remember we didn't really know whether it was an insult or what. You know, heavy metal. It sounds like didn't really know what to make of that term. But eventually, we felt like, yeah, actually, the more we think about it, if anybody's heavy metal, yeah, fuck yeah, we're metal.
On June 27, 1981, there was a backyard party at my buddy Clem's house, my sister's friend Clem's house, and Caton was playing with LA Chaos, or it was even before LA Chaos, I think it was just Chaos, yeah. And you know, they were doing a bunch of covers. I remember them doing, you know, Never Say Die, and they were doing like Rock Bottom and stuff like that. But I saw this dude, this blonde dude, wearing a Maiden shirt, and I ran right up to him. I was like, dude, where'd you get that shirt? Oh my God.
But you know, I'm driving, he's pointing, and then he just dropped me off over there. I'm looking, it's like, you know, the freeway. You want me to just drop you off on the corner? Just drop me over there on the corner there. Okay, and I pull over and we get out of the car and I sit there and go, where the fuck is this guy gonna go? And next thing you know, I see him walk and he just goes under the overpass there. He was sleeping under the overpass in Hollywood.
It was black shirt, and it was the first album cover, but it was all in just white, you know, just white. And where'd you get that shirt? I've never even met anybody that even knows who Maiden was, you know, like You're South Side or whatever. Hi, buddy. And he's like, well, I made it. I was like, oh, even cooler. Can you make me one? You know, I fished out $10 from my. And T-shirts weren't even, you know, concert shirts weren't even that expensive at the time, you know. So, yeah. And I was like, it's $10. Can you make me a shirt? He's like, no.
You could go to any nightclub in Orange County or Los Angeles any night of the week, and someone good was playing.
This guitar has some character to it.
Yeah, that's so awesome. That's a very rare one, huh?
I was like, oh, please, come on. I went and found Lisa, got another $5 or $10 from her. I was like, here's $20. Will you make me a shirt? He's like, no, fuck off.
Like, there's lots of other bands did more poppier albums than we did, and more of them. But we were the guys that got burned at the stake for it.
And, you know, 8 months later or whatever, and, you know, we're going to see Saxon, and I'm walking in as the opening band is going on stage, and he turns around. I was like, I turned to my buddy, he's like, hey, that's the motherfucker that wouldn't make me the Iron Maiden shirt. Sure enough, it was Metallica. So I got to tell him the story, and he thought that was pretty fun, you know. He's like, I believe that I would tell you to fuck off at a party, you know. Just because we play heavy metal doesn't have to mean that we're a bunch of ding-dongs.